What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Hopefully everyone's doing great, doing as well as Scottie Scheffler, who just won the British Open. I did a podcast yesterday with Colin. I recorded my own reaction podcast, so we got a lot of content from Sunday. I saw something today with Jerry Jones, who just can't get out of his own way, that I wanted to address when it comes to his negotiation tactics, which feel a little archaic. So we will dive into that, as well as some other stories around the NFL, some injuries, a retirement that I did not see coming, as well as a contract extension. So I'm recording this on the 21st. We are 10 days away from the Hall of Fame game. So we got a couple teams already in pads, I think, in the Chargers and the Lions who are playing in that game. And most teams in the NFL, I would imagine, will be in pads by give or take the 29th, 30th, 31st, kind of right around the Hall of Fame game. Teams will be in full pads. So we're not that far away from just football going on all over the country, which is exciting. This is always a great time of year, mid to late summer, the fall, football, smell the grass. It's exciting. I also want to touch on something in regards to a stigma that I thought that we had overcome in society, which there was a moment yesterday on social media celebrating a champion that, really hit home and made me sad and angry at the same time. So we'll dive into that as well. But before we touch on Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, I got to tell my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime, best in the business, does not get any better. I love my friends at Gametime because I had FOMO this week. I had everyone I knew in Arizona was at the Morgan Wallen concert. He played back-to-back nights in Glendale. Guess they got to work on the egress, getting out of there. Absolute disaster. I've been there one time for a concert. It sucks. But listen, I got friends that went in Sacramento, in Tahoe. I'm sure many of you attended concerts this summer. So if you want to go to one, we got baseball season in the final stretch of the season. We have football right around the corner. I mean, football is right around the corner. A lot of you guys have hit me up going, hey, I've already bought my tickets for this game. Hey, me and my dad are going to go to an SEC game for the first time. Thanks for the promo. No problem. Any event you want to go to, you can search by the team. You can search by the arena. You can search by the stadium. It does not get any easier. So here's the thing, fellas. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. I think we have to acknowledge something. That there are a lot of parallels with Jerry and the Cowboys going into, as he's been in his 80s, to the final stretch of Al Davis and the Raiders. It becomes a little chaotic because of the owner. And obviously, there are financial differences. The Cowboys, if they became up for sale, we just saw the Lakers be valued at $10 billion. I think it's fair to say that the Cowboys would go for double that. And their financial revenue ability is second to none. And their brand is worldwide. They're definitely the biggest, which is crazy because they haven't won a Super Bowl in since the mid-90s. They are a cash cow. And Jerry's a huge part of that. And let me say this. I admire Jerry, the businessman, because I think people that I've always looked up to in any walk of life, especially when it comes to business or sports or just professional endeavors, typically have some cojones, have a little shit to them, and have had points in time in their life when they've had to make a big decision and they've put their nuts on the table. And Jerry obviously did that in the late 80s. His story's well documented. Self-made guy who bought the Cowboys when he didn't even really have the money. So I respect that. But I'm also old enough to been around the block a few times and know a few people that work in family businesses. Clearly not as big as the Cowboys, but successful operations. And anytime the quote-unquote patriarch, the old man, whether it's the dad, the grandpa, makes a lot of money, and doesn't need anybody anymore, yet is still involved in the operation, the older he gets, sometimes the more difficult he becomes. He's not going to listen to anybody. And I think when you look at the current climate of sports, there's a consistent theme when it comes to these negotiations. One, the money being given out in the team sports in America, baseball, basketball, and obviously football, has never been greater. Pro athletes in my life have always made a lot of money. The amount they are making now I try not to become numb to talking about it because of how big the sums are, but the more and more you see these numbers get thrown around, it just kind of becomes normal, even though when you are paying people hundreds of millions of dollars, it's the equivalent of some of these people that sell their tech companies. I mean, it's crazy how much these guys are accumulating right now in professional sports. And Jerry, when I grew up, anyone my age, in the 90s, pro sports was a lot more raw. You would have a lot of public fights between coaches and players, GMs and players, and owners and players. Social media didn't exist. So when you would have contract talks or trade talks, it was just kind of no holds barred. There was not a filter typically on either side. And now we have kind of become a corporate version of that. There is just too much on the line, right? There was a lot of money on the line back then, but the numbers have exponentially grown. So most negotiations in most sports, especially football, when you hear the GM, the coach, and the owner talk, they typically don't say anything. They give you the kind of go-to kind of corporate jargon of, we're going to keep this in-house. This is between us and his representation. We do not make our negotiations public. I'll give the Browns credit. When Myles Garrett went to the Super Bowl and said, I want to trade. I want fucking out of here. It's like, damn, this dude's going on the Super Bowl car wash and telling us how he feels. I was like, if I was the Browns, I'd trade him right now for like 2 1s and 2 2s. You got an excuse to get rid of him. Your team's going to suck anyway. You might as well utilize this powerful asset. But Jimmy Haslam said no. Because Myles Garrett and Clutch, who represents him, said, we want a meeting. And Jimmy Haslam said, not so fast, my friend. No meeting. Discuss the business with Andrew Berry. And Andrew Berry said, we're not trading you. We want to keep you. We plan on paying you. That was kind of it. We just saw TJ Watt get a huge contract. It wasn't a public negotiation. Most of these, Fred Warner, George Kittle, not a public negotiation. Okay, you know what Scottie Scheffler taught us? You drive for show, but you putt for dough. And the easiest way for you to make some dough, betting on this week's tournament on DraftKings. From the opening round through Sunday, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered. Chris Gotterup, who just finished third at the Open and won the week before at the Scottish Open, betting favorite this week. Do think he's going to run out of juice. Do you know one name I like a lot? Tony Finau. Showed some serious life across the pond. You can get him right now to win the tournament, plus 350, or plus 3,500, excuse me. But plus 650 to top 5, plus 330 to top 10. Tony Finau has won this tournament before. So like Tony Finau a lot. Wyndham Clark, Mav McNeely, a couple other guys to keep an eye on, trending, trying to battle for a spot on the Ryder Cup team. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers, bet 5 to get 150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN, J-O-H-N. I got an H in my name, J-O-H-N. For new customers to get 150 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Yeah, with Jerry Jones, give a listen, because today he gave, as he does every single year, kind of the state of the franchise, which most GMs and coaches do at the start of training camp. This week, I'm sure there'll be one with Les Snead and Sean McVay. I'm sure there was one with Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz. Just like in the next couple days, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Very normal. That's normal business. You know who you don't see at any of these places? Is the owner standing right there. Let's take a listen to Jerry today.
Just because we sign him doesn't mean we're going to have him. He was hurt 6 games last year. Seriously. We've signed, I remember signing a player for the highest paid at the position in the league, and he got knocked out 2/3 of the year, Dak Prescott. So there's a lot of things you can think about when you, just as the player does, when you're thinking about committing and guaranteeing money.
This archaic practice of giving everything you think to the public, letting your players know of just your raw emotion. I think one thing we all learn, for any of you, obviously, if you're married in a serious relationship, something you learn as you get a little older as a guy is like you don't need to say everything that comes into your head, right? And I think this works for your personal relationships, your professional relationships. Hell, I've really taken this tactic on social media. I'm like, I got a lot of thoughts. I used to share way too many of them just because, like, what's the point? Just keep some stuff to yourself, right? And it's no different in negotiations with the Rooneys and TJ Watt. Like, sometimes it's going to get ugly behind the scenes. You know what? No one gets to know about that. It's not all, rainbows and unicorns and party, right? Sometimes I'm sure there are things said that, like, God damn, it's called negotiation. They don't do it in public. Because you know why? There's nothing to be gained. And in the 80s and the 90s, when Jerry became a household name, that's how you did business. And it was suitable. It was actually very normal. It was not, you weren't going against the grain if you told the media, which obviously got back to the player, how you felt and how things were going. That doesn't take place anymore. One, these negotiations, there's so much money on the line. Who does it behoove to create a more chaotic situation? Two, with social media, everything gets magnified to the 100th degree now. It just makes it a more chaotic situation for your player. And listen, as you get older, you can handle things said to you that you couldn't before. But in pro sports, especially football, when you are giving a player, as the Cowboys are going to do with Micah Parsons, because the moment you don't trade him before the draft, you are going to pay him. And Jerry did this with CeeDee Lamb. He's going to do it again with Micah Parsons. You're going to pay him the most money in the history of the NFL for a pass rusher. That's going to happen. It's inevitable. Now, you can argue over a couple million here and there, but we know the number. So Jerry putting this out there, you're dealing with a guy, just like any team would be, the first extension you give a player, somewhere between the ages of 24 and 26. So unlike if you're doing negotiations with some 65-year-old who's been through the ringer for decades in business, he can handle a lot. He's got thick skin. Just the reason a lot of these guys have representation, because going to Drew Rosenhaus, going to Tom Condon, going to whoever, they've seen it all. They've heard it all. They're not Jimmy Haslam, or excuse me, Jimmy Sexton doesn't get offended at every time that you come back to a counter in negotiations. You know why? He's been negotiating these contracts for decades. He's seen it all. Micah Parsons, this is the first big contract of his life. This is more money than he probably ever could have dreamed of a decade ago. And you got the owner coming out and making comments which are factual. He missed games. Factual. Dak Prescott shattered his ankle. We all know that. But what good does that do? And while it's a different situation than Al Davis in the late 2000s, the parallels to me feel like the owner aging not gracefully, doesn't know how to pivot as times have pivoted. Unlike the Raiders, the Cowboys don't have financial issues, but they do have an ownership issue. They do have a guy that you could see the look on Brian Schottenheimer's face if you saw the video. Steven, I would imagine, is not going to do this whenever Jerry is no longer around because it makes it more difficult. You don't need to create animosity in these negotiations. Here's the other thing. Jerry has said before this. We would rather pay a little more and get it right. I would agree with that statement if you're talking about free agents. Because typically you've got to pay more in free agency. You pay a 30, 40, 50% sticker price to get the guy's services. And for the most part, you're not dealing with the elite players. That's why they hit free agency. But Jerry says that, and most of the time he's giving out these huge contracts to guys he's drafted. So when you sign a guy you've drafted, no one knows that player better than yourself.
I remember like in the scouting process, you get to know a guy, you get to know the coaches, you get to know the assistants. And I saw it when I was a GA and I watched our guys get scouted. And you do all this work on obviously the player, but the character, the love of football, their work ethic, their toughness, their mental toughness, just how good of a guy they are, to just how they treat people, all that shit, right? And you feel really good about it. Maybe you pound the table in the draft room. But until you get the guy in the building, you don't realize how important he is to you as a player, right? The Chiefs did. We'll get into George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie and the guys they drafted who are everything that they want in a guy. The Ravens have been doing this forever. The Steelers are good at this to get your type players and just tough old school football guys. But Jerry, you drafted these guys. Like you've been around them all the time. You've seen them as a player through the good and the bad. Like, so what are you waiting for? So I just assume that the Cowboys are going to pay Micah a historic amount of money in about 4 or 5 weeks because that's what they've consistently done with Dak, what they did a couple years ago or last year with CD, and that's what they'll do with Micah Parsons. But you just kind of create this weirdness in your organization that you just gave a first-time head coach a job that, let's face it, I don't just like shitting on this guy because I feel like that's the easy thing to do, but no one else was giving him a head coaching job. Brian Schottenheimer was not going to be a head coach for anyone else. Even though a decade plus ago he was a coaching candidate, turned some jobs down, career went the other way, and it looked like he was never going to become a head coach. But in 2025, Jerry Jones was the only guy giving him a job. And let's face it, like the players aren't idiots. He's probably one of the lowest paid coaches in the league. So Jerry, a lot like Al Davis, is like, this guy doesn't have any juice. Why would I fucking listen to this guy? If I'm good enough, I'll just do whatever I want. Jerry's mad at me, but I was like, I'll just go to him. And if you look around the league, and this is what I said about once training camp starts, the GM and head coach will give a press conference. And for the most part, maybe GMs will do like Coward Show or come on a podcast or whatever. But they don't talk all the time, right? The coach is the voice of the organization because he's the boss. And when the players think that like, hey, if I screw up, Kyle Shanahan's going to bench me. If I don't run this route right, like Sean McVay's going to cut me and put me back on the practice squad. For 2+ decades, you knew Bill Belichick was in charge. He didn't sign the checks. He didn't own the team, but Bill was in charge. You screw up in Kansas City, like you answer to Andy. And that's the healthy way to run an organization. Yet with the Cowboys, I would say the Bengals on the same way, like, the owner's in charge. Even Shamar Stewart's agent said today, because Duke Tobin's like, we need him here, said that like he shouldn't be talking. He's not running point on this negotiation. It's above his pay grade, which is an all-time line from an agent, but he's saying it because that guy's not running point in the organization. He's not in charge. The owner's the GM. And when you run organizations like that, and let's face it, we like Joe Burrow a lot more than we like Dak Prescott, it's hard to win. It's why most people, despite having Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, you just bet against the Bengals. It's why the Cowboys, it's like, I actually think they probably could be a little better than people think. I think most people think they're just going to suck. Wouldn't shock me if they're just competitive. Probably not a playoff team, but like I could see them in the mix to be like 8-9 wins. But I also could see them implode, right? And just quit on Brian Schottenheimer. And that's just kind of what happens as your organization becomes like this owner-centric guy. This is not like George Steinbrenner 1996. Those days are over. Most of these owners don't say shit. They just look at the Excel spreadsheet and the money flowing in, and they let their GM and their head coach handle everything. Obviously, they get involved at the highest level, but they never talk. They only talk when kind of forced. A couple owners' meetings, and that might be it. And maybe if they fire a coach. But if things are going well, like they're not going to speak. Yet Jerry can't help himself. Like he has to be the star of the franchise. And it's kind of sad because I grew up, the Cowboys were a really big deal. They were the biggest deal in the NFL right there with the 49ers. The rivalry, and then to the late 90s, what happened to him? Jerry's ego got in the way. And you could argue his ego's been in charge ever since. And beside like the ability to get Parcells and get that stadium built, which is cool. I've been there. It's crazy. It's probably almost not far away from being like 20 years old, but awesome accomplishment. What are his highlights the last 25 years? Seriously. And he really only has himself to blame. But I also I've been around not at the level of Jerry's wealth, but enough successful old guys in their 70s, in their 80s. My dad was a farmer, right? I knew a lot of old school farmers. Usually doesn't age well. They talk about how we did things back in the day. It's like, well, that's 30 years ago. You might want to pivot here, buddy. And I just think Jerry's pivoted as poorly as anybody when it comes to just like times have changed, man.
Are you interested in investing in Bitcoin and not sure how to get started? Well, with the Gemini Credit Card, a card that I've been using now for a couple months, you can dip your toes into the Bitcoin world without even trying. You just spend like you normally do. I go to the gas station, I use it. I go to the grocery store, I use it. I take my wife out, I use it. And I instantly earn up to 4% back in Bitcoin or one of the over 50 other cryptos straight to your account you can choose. There's no annual fee. And the Gemini credit card is a no-brainer. I love it. I use it all the time. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin intro bonus. So just go to Gemini.com/John to learn more and start earning today. Terms apply. Again, you go to Gemini.com/John and start building your Bitcoin stash now. Terms apply. The Gemini credit card is issued by WebBank, and in order to qualify for the intro $200 crypto bonus, your application must be approved by June 30th, 2025, and spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. Terms apply. Some exclusions apply to instant rewards, in which rewards are deposited when the transaction posts. This content is not investment advice, and trading crypto involves risk. For more details on rates, fees, and other Gemini credit card terms, see rates and fees. Go to Gemini.com/John to learn more and start earning today.
A couple other things. We kind of hit on the Bengals there, but it's really hard to overcome. I think it's really hard to overcome chaos. It's why so many people that grow up in chaos, we all have known them. Maybe you did. Any situation when you're young that's impacts you the rest of your life. And as you get older, chaotic situations can really derail you. And it's why the Bengals, they have multiple guys holding out, a rookie, their star pass rusher. It's kind of been a consistent theme in this organization, despite they've drafted pretty well over the years. They've had some pretty good teams on paper, but it's kind of always the same thing, and I just, I will just bet against the Bengals. No matter, you can tell me Joe Burrow throws 50 touchdowns. I'd be like, yeah, it's still going to be tough for them to overcome the Mike Brown operation because that's not changing. And I don't tried to really read up onto the situation with the rookie and the language. Florio's got an agenda. He's obviously on the agent side. Mike Brown claims that this clause is just about going to jail or something. It's I don't know. It just shouldn't be this complicated. That's what I know. It just should not be this complicated. And it's always kind of sometimes that complicated with Mike Brown. Think about a place that the Kansas City Chiefs, and they deserve a lot of credit that several years ago, let's face it, I mean, it's aged incredibly well. At the time, even I thought, Coach Reed, man, Beach, are you sure you want to trade Tyreek Hill? He's one of the great players we've ever seen in the peak of his powers, and you guys are going to punt on him? Yeah, we're just not comfortable. Probably some things that we know that you don't know, and we're just not paying him $30 million a year. So they punted, and they traded him before the draft, so they had two first-round picks, and they got Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis. They just gave George a 4-year, $93 million extension, I think $60 million guaranteed, and just knowing guys there, they love these two guys. And that draft, specifically those two individuals, has been a big reason with Chris Jones and Spags that they were a defensive team the last 2 years, despite winning one of the great offensive coaches and quarterbacks in the history of the sport. And it's not just these guys are good players. McDuffie's a really good starter. Karlaftis is a really good starter. I don't know if either of them are Hall of Fame, all-time great players, but they're championship level players. And they're winning players. And they're everything you want off the field. from a way they operate, from a way they work, from a way they play and or prepare to play. And I think the Chiefs are a good example of even when weird shit happens, they just feel we got it handled. Like the Rashee Rice situation, he's going to get suspended. Like, well, we got it handled. Yet when these situations happen with some of these other teams, like, I don't know, man. So, the Chiefs, they've spent some money this offseason. Trey Smith, Karloftis, and they're just paying money to their type guys, right? And to be a good football player in the NFL, I don't think much has changed from previous generations. Obviously, you got to be good and have the physical capabilities, but your practice habits, how mentally and physically tough you are, how serious you take football, how much you want it, all the intangible stuff matters now as much as it ever did. Phillip Rivers, if you told me when did Phillip Rivers retire, I'd be like 5 years ago. Announced his retirement today. I saw a headline. Phillip Rivers announces his retirement. Like, hasn't Phil Rivers been coaching the high school team for like 3 or 4 years? Isn't his son uh, like one of the big recruits in the country? Kind of plays and throws just like him. I think he's going to end up at NC State. But I don't know. Maybe he's 15, 16 years old. Obviously, Rivers has like 75 kids. But I just laughed out loud when I saw Phillip Rivers announce his retirement. I always enjoyed Phillip. I've said this forever. I saw within the last couple weeks that Drew Brees is going to call one of the Netflix games on Christmas. And listen, I have a lot of respect for Drew. Obviously, as one of the all-time great players of his generation, Hall of Famer. I think he'd be an excellent like GM or offensive coordinator, or head coach. He's terrible on TV. I mean, he's just not. We're in the entertainment business. He's just not entertaining. I think Phillip would have been awesome on TV. I mean, tailor made for definitely for the networks. Doesn't swear. Animated, excited. I think there's like a John Madden kind of jovial, but the player version. I think he would have been a star. Now I don't know if he's ever going to do it, but if I ran a network, I know these networks are just they have a hard on for like getting the most famous guy possible. We've seen time and time again that is not and obviously Phillip's not as famous as some of these other guys that get these gigs, or he's not a former Cowboy quarterback. I would just keep hitting him up because if he ever just retires from high school coaching and get him in the booth, I think he would be a star. Will Levis, got to be one of my all time. It could have been heat of the moment, but I remember watching him a couple times his junior year. So the year before he declared, I definitely put this out on the old Twitter that I thought he could be the number one pick in the draft. Now I gotta listen. I got a little thing for strong arm quarterbacks, and Liam Cohen was his offensive coordinator. Kentucky was really good. Liam leaves. Scangarello comes in his senior year. Will Levis is just not really good. Has some games that you're just shaking your head. Obviously falls out of the first round. Goes to the Titans. Gets shoulder surgery today. He's out for the season. Unofficially, it ends his Titan career. He's not going to be on the Titans ever again after this. It crossed my mind today. Now, there are some years where a team has like 7 injuries at quarterback. You never say never. I do think going into a season, you can just probably cross Will Levis. Never again be in a two deep because you wouldn't want him as a backup quarterback, right? He's just too terrible, kind of a screw around guy. And honestly, your backup quarterback, you would just want if anything, to be really, really limited and understand that. The problem with Will Levis is he thinks he's like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, and he clearly is not. And he's just not instinctive. He's just not good. I mean, there's just no way around it. Now he has this major injury at shoulder, but the Titans, Cam Ward, and sayonara to Will Levis. I want to end on this because I think a lot of you either have this happen to you or know people that it has impacted. I started losing my hair in my early 20s. My dad was bald. My uncles are bald. My cousins are bald. My brother is bald. Keeping my fingers crossed that my son, because it's my mother's or his mother's genes, will not be bald. But the genetics in my family, when it comes to hair, let's say we're not exactly, Brad Pitt and River runs through it. But here's the thing. We've come a long way. Like when I was a kid, my dad, who was bald, used to have like the way worse version of Trump's hair, right? He grew out the sides and he had the comb over. I could never do that. Luckily, the stigma of being bald, whether it's finding someone to date you, definitely Hollywood. These guys are wearing wigs. You could not be bald and be quote unquote famous back in the day. Now, from Joe Rogan to Jason Statham to Bruce Willis to obviously Bezos, like we've had a fucking renaissance. Being bald, we're all cool with it. No one cares. You can bick your head. That didn't exist like 25 years ago. The Rock. I mean, we've had a great run. The stigma of being bald no longer exists. And I didn't have a receding hairline, right? Which is a slow burn. I had the hair falling off all over the top of my head and a huge bald spot in the back that was working its way forward. A lot of you guys are receding and you kind of hold on for dear life. It's like a boat taking on water. You try to patch it up, but then another hole pops and you can't keep the boat above the water. So listen, I understand where you're coming from. And I think most of us, especially if you're young, if you don't have a significant other, you just like, am I going to find a girl if I don't have any hair in that's your biggest insecurity as a guy. And then you realize, no, chicks, I remember the first time I ever shaved my head, started dating, and chicks loved it. I was like, oh, who even cares? And you realize you don't even look back, and then you see all these other bald guys, and you're like, God, we're just a community that's thriving. Scottie Scheffler, who clearly has a receding hairline, is crushing it. He's made $85 million on the golf course in like the last 3 years. He is charting a path that, I don't want to say Tiger, but is passing a lot of the all-time greats. And if he can stay healthy for a couple more years, he's clearly going to go down as one of the great players of all time. He wins his 4th major, the oldest major, a place where golf was invented, Scotland, Ireland, the Open. TaylorMade, him and Nike and TaylorMade, his biggest sponsor, put out these social media clips with Scotty celebrating on the 18th victory with his hat off, and you can see his receding hairline. Except TaylorMade, they messed with the picture. They photoshopped his hair. They refused to let him be bald. And I'm not going to lie, I was hurt by it. I play TaylorMade clubs. I love my irons. They're the best set of irons I've ever owned. But for them to do that, someone in TaylorMade's digital department looked at Scotty and said, we're not going to allow a bald guy in this moment, despite him balding. Sad, because I thought we didn't just have a renaissance. I thought the stigma of being bald was basically over. That it's okay. And listen, he's married. He's got a kid. He's rich. He can be bald. He can have hair. None of it matters. So the greatest golfer of all time, Tiger Woods. I don't know if you've seen him with his hat off, especially through his late 30s, throughout his 40s. Bald as a bat. I mean, Tiger has about as many hairs as I do. Sad day, though, TaylorMade. I expected more. As someone you don't sponsor me, I've paid for your product. I appreciate your product. I play your balls, too. To do that to his hairline, man. Come on. Haven't we come farther than that?